To begin this series, we must go to the very start of the timeline, when the planets were full of life, and when every faction was not at war, and when a sense of peace ruled over the lands. This would all change when the first godly spirits came into contact. The godly spirits have been theorized to be eternally wandering before the first contact, with no evidence of any origin. These godly spirits who met each other held the titles of Amatos, who is the god of bravery and courage, the god Liberty, who stands for might and freedom, and the god Helio, who stood for forgiveness, and finally Lionel, who stands for courage. Once united, they formed a council where they discussed their plan of uniting their powers to make a single planet with superior power so they can prove their might to the other gods. After growing ideals of this new planet were made, Helio grew more and more selfish, wanting to be superior and own it all himself. Helio got enraged and tried to attack Amatos and Liberty in rage, wishing to have his own power. Liberty and Lionel wanted to chat with Helio. They wanted to make a deal with him. Liberty and Lionel finally asked Helio to part from the deal, and they would give Helio his own planet. Lionel and Liberty did not want Helio to get mad, so they politely asked. Outraged, Helio demanded that Amatos gave him power over the planet, fighting and screaming. The other gods banished Helio from their territory, leaving Helio with nothing but an empty void. Helio wanted revenge. He decided to make his own planet, with a strong army, a large one too, one that could destroy them and reclaim the gods' planet. Helio descended into darkness and hatred, having his title of forgiveness changed to hatred and greed. In fear of Helio's plans, the rest of the gods, Lionel, Amatos, and Liberty, quickly combined their powers into a planet and made strong warriors in case if Helio attacked again. They created Amatons and Edowidas, the fiercest warriors. The Amatons were strong and relentless warriors, who showed bravery from Amatos and courage from Lionel. The first Amatons were given many godly attributes, including strength, agility, and dexterity. The Amatons were given the ability to quickly adapt to their environment, using an altered form of evolution. The Edowidas were a bit weaker than the Amatons, but there was many more of them. The Edowidas symbolized might from Liberty and courage from Lionel, standing bold and never backing down in the face of danger, ready for death when it comes. But something was growing in the darkness. Helio's mighty empire of endless soldiers and corrupt mystics was growing, under the control of Helio. Helio met with another god named Wisp. Wisp appeared similarly to Helio and acted fairly similar. With a passion for darkness and corruption, Helio attempted to merge powers with Wisp, with no intent of creating a peaceful planet, no intent of making an honest population, but with the want of destruction and hate. Helio and Wisp made an agreement of making a strong population, in quotes. Unaware of Helio's past heresy, Wisp agreed to Helio. They went through the long process of making a planet, Wisp unknowing of Helio forging it with dark essence. Once this dark and dreadful planet was created, it was given an equally distorted name, Kranek. Helio and Wisp made their own warriors, Wisp creating the Whisperers, a strong and loyal type of soldier who is stubborn in their defense, never leaving their father's side and control. Helio created the Shadalians, also known as the League of Shadows, a massive never-ending army of mindless soldiers who are all under the same control of Helio's mind. They would all follow every single order, Helio not caring about their losses in the slightest. Helio would give these soldiers powers of dark magic, making them even stronger, equipping them with cloth and metal armor and medium swords, allowing them to be agile in combat. After abusing his godly powers, Helio made an endless army of soldiers all under his command. These soldiers behaved just as Nazis would, incapable of showing any remorse at all. As Lionel, Liberty, and Amatos forged a massive planet for their warriors, they created an official alliance, all promising to never leave each other's side in command, even until death. They would be known as the Swade Alliance. The Swayed Alliance was vulnerable for a long time as they prepared their massive planet, being vulnerable to the League of Shadows during its creation. After the Swayed Alliance finalized the planet and were ready to forge their first warriors, they must give it a name. After the one who started the Swayed Alliance, Amatos named the planet after himself, meaning that the planet was full of brave warriors who would not back down. Amatos was filled to the brim with valuable resources so the Amatons and Edoitas can grow into a powerful nation. These first Amatons and Edoitas were all demigods, slowly losing their power over time. Meanwhile, something in the darkness was growing. Helios' army was growing into a large and powerful empire, greatly outnumbering the Amatons and Edoitas. After Helio got a glimpse of how weak the Swayed Alliance was at this current time, he launched a huge attack to try erasing the Swayed Alliance and their soldiers. Helio would kill all his soldiers in order to be in control. While setting up their first civilization, the Amatons and Edoitas were bombarded by a horde of Shadalians charging their way. The Shadalians outnumbered the Swayed Alliance soldiers by far, but the allied soldiers were much more powerful. Out of rage, the Amatons lined themselves up and charged back, screaming like demons. The Shadalians were incredibly shocked and terrified at the sight of the Amatons and Edoitas' response, but under the command of Helio, the Shadalians kept charging into a certain death. The Amatons and Edoitas were brutally slaughtered one by one, but on Helio's side of the war, the Shadalians were getting pounded en masse. The Amatons and Edoitas held their ground, fighting in a hell that lasted a grand amount of time. The Amatons and Edoitas were finally getting their asses handed to them, having their population easily cut down. Amatos, Liberty, and Lionel were all outraged, but especially Amatos and Lionel. Lionel and Amatos took part of their spirits and forged them into a new race of Amatons. These Amatons had skin thick as steel and strength of a god, and fear was a forgotten concept for these new soldiers. These new Amatons were sent into a charge, mowing down every Shadalian they saw. The tide of war has been turned, but these brave Amatons single-handedly killed off a majority of the Shadalians. Helio had lost the war. Fearing the Amatons would erase his army, if Helio's army was gone, he knew that he would be killed quickly. Helio fled with part of his army while leaving the remaining Shadalians in the battlefield, so that the Swayed Alliances would not notice his retreat. Helio started to think deeply. How could he win the war and get back into control? Helio had an idea. He would use his power of mind control on the new Amatons. Helio would be unstoppable. And he was. The Swayed Alliances were as good as gone. As Helio captured these new Amatons, he began testing them, slowly changing the Amatons into Shadalians. These new soldiers were unstoppable, much stronger than an Amaton. Helio was growing his army massively with these new soldiers. He would call them the Forsaken Ones, and these soldiers were merciless as a storm. They followed his command and would obey his every order. Unlike the Shadalians, the Forsaken showed no fear. Soon, Wisp accidentally stumbled upon Helio's plans to kill him and harnessed the Wisp's power after obtaining Amatos. Wisp would then unify with the Swayed Alliances, joining their armies together to fend against Helio. Wisp told Amatos, Lionel, and Liberty about Helio's acts of corruption, and how Helio was taking and recreating the new Amatons. Wisp revealed his army of Whisperers, a terrifying rank of skilled and powerful combatants. Knowing about Helio's plan, the Swayed Alliances had time to act quickly against Helio's corruption. Without hesitation, Amatos commanded all soldiers to defend the front lines, making sure that the Shadalians did not come without warning. After days of waiting, the Shadalians came back in to invade once more, but with an army of soldiers stronger than before, the Forsaken Ones take down wave after wave of Amatons and Edoitas, still struggling to defeat the Whisperers. With the overpowering number of Shadalians, the Swayed Alliances held their ground until death. The end of the war was drawing near, and the Swayed Alliances had suffered a traumatic defeat. The Shadalians marched forward and to conquer all in the land of Amatos, and kill all of the Swayed Alliance soldiers on sight. With very few soldiers left, the Swayed Alliances had come up with an idea that would outlast the League of Shadows. But the time to think was shrinking down as the Shadalians marched closer and closer. Suddenly, Liberty had an idea. What if, instead of holding their ground, they directly charged Helio? It was all or nothing. The Swayed Alliance's brave soldiers knew that most of them would die, but they would die for a greater cause. Fueled by rage, the Swayed Alliance soldiers sprinted through the enemy front lines, destined to reach Helio. Helio was heavily guarded, so the Swayed Alliance's soldiers pounded their way to Helio. With lots of courage, the brave soldiers started attacking Helio. He was badly wounded, and he ordered his men to retreat and protect him before he died. As the Shadalians fell back with Helio, the Amatons followed them and captured some Shadalians that were never seen again. As Helio fell back, the Swayed Alliances were ravaging their way to Helio, trying to kill all of the Shadalians in their way. Soon, the Swayed Alliances left the remains of the League of Shadows to retreat, as they followed them through oceans and continents, continuously killing them off. Spreading too far out would be risky for the Swayed Alliances. Soon, the Amatons, Idoitas, and Whisperers would begin their journey back home. Along the journey, they set up a small structure every few miles, and left only a small amount of soldiers at each one so they could reproduce. Once the army finally reached their front lines, it was time they forged their civilizations, so they could be ready for the next attack when it comes. And they were. The Shadalians and Swayed Alliances were forever declared enemies. This conflict would only get much worse.